In this video, we focus on the settings. We will discuss the concept behind different aspects of the configuration and how everything ties together in the end when it comes down to the naming convention and the transcoding templates. When ingesting new elements into the software, there are different types of source files. The input source can be a single file, like a movie file or a single image. On the other hand, the source can be a sequence of files. This will properly be something like an EXR sequence. The output file path for a single file will look similar to this when it is ingested into the library. For a sequence of files, there is an additional part, the frame counter of the sequence, that is directly included in the file name of the file. It is represented here by the hashtags. Depending on your configuration, a single file could be ingested as a single file, but with the sequence file naming. The element will only have one image, but with the frame counter in the file name. Again, on the other hand, if the source is a sequence of files, it could be converted to a movie file, which would now be a single file, with a single file naming. Don't worry if this might seem confusing at first. That is why -element will help you with that step. But first we have to understand what different parts are required to build a file path. Let's have a closer look at the file path for a single file again. Here is an example for a file path for an element of the library. The path can be split into different parts. First there is the library root, which points to the server location. Followed by the folder structure of the element. That is here the element folder. Next we have the file name. And the last part is the file extension. As you can see, we split the different parts into the little boxes. For the file path of a sequence it will be quite similar. We break the path into its single parts. But there is one difference, as you might have noticed. And that is the frame counter, which is included in the file name. In -element you will use path patterns to assemble your file paths. You have placeholders that will be replaced by the actual values during the ingest time. Let's examine how a resolution folder could look like. Again, we split the folder name into the different parts. The first part is the resolution type. This could be something like proxy or thumbnail, or maybe main for the main element. Next there is the width and the height of the element, followed by the color space name. Did you notice the underscores? These are fixed values in the file path. -element calls them generic characters. The width and the height, however, will resolve to the actual numbers. They can be different each time, depending on the element that you want to ingest. That is why you can use these value placeholders when you create your naming convention. During the ingest, or the creation of proxies, they will get replaced by the actual values. The resolution type and the color space are user-specific. These are so-called path values. This can be any text that you set, and that you can use to overwrite if required. The character X is something that should stay as it is and we don't want to replace it. Alright, so what you see here now is what we understand as a path pattern. The little boxes are placeholders that will be resolved into the actual values later on. Let's talk about the different types of these placeholders. First, there are custom values that you as a user can set. Then there are some generic characters which you will probably need quite often to build up your path. The path patterns is what we have just discussed before. Each pattern has a key that can be used in other path patterns to reference to that pattern. We have the default values, which are fixed values that are dependent on the ingested element, like the category name, the element's resolution, or the source file path. And the last one is the path value. These can be used, so we can overwrite them at different steps in the ingest process, for example to overwrite them in the different transcoding templates. Everything will make more sense once you see how it all works in action. All that is now left to do is to discuss the category hierarchy structure. There are the top-tier categories which make the most sense for grouping certain types of elements like fire, smoke or destruction. Here we have some example categories. You will probably agree that we can group these categories together, and that fire somehow sums up all the other categories. The fire category can be considered as the top-tier category, or the base category. The other categories are the child categories. The parent category of a torch is flame. And the top-tier category of a torch is the fire. So why do we need this hierarchy? Organizing elements into top-tier categories will help with naming and storing elements on disk. If you want to include the category name, like torch or flame, in the folder name, and in the future you decide to change the category of the element, it could cause a problem because the file name and the actual category would then be different. But when you are using the top-tier category name, like fire, it will still work, because both a flame and a torch can be considered as a fire element. The file name will still be correct. Changing the category can be done easily in the database while the file stays in the same location on disk. This is important if a user wants to load a project file from a few years ago and wants to avoid missing media files. Das element leverages descriptions and synonyms for each category from public domain sources. Wikidata identifiers are key pillars in this process. Behind every Wikipedia page there is one specific Wikidata item. The benefits from using data of this public domain knowledge base are description texts, synonyms and translations to different languages. Since each category can be linked to one exact Wikidata page, we can unify one common understanding and vocabulary about what a certain category is called. No matter where you are from or what language you speak, you won't have any issues finding the right element.